And we're live! Hi, my name is Sophia Botha. Welcome to the latest edition of Botha Rants, the stream where we go through all the latest political and LGBTQ news of interest, or at least interest to me. Apologies for there not being a show last night. I had an allergic reaction to something. I'm still not feeling brilliant, but I'm at least well enough to do this show. And we have much to talk about. I'm sure people will be aware that there was an election, a general election in Israel. Well, if people have been watching this show, they would have heard me mention it on Tuesday, because it was on Tuesday. Well, the headline says that Netanyahu fails to gain a right-wing majority in final election tally, and this is from the Jerusalem Post. We'll get into the details. However, he will have a majority of sorts. As I said, we'll get into it. So anyways.
Netanyahu fails to gain right-wing majority in final election tally. Pro-Netanyahu camp with Naftali Bennett ends at 59, while religious Zionist party rules out support from Arab Islamists. The Central Elections Committee completed the process of counting all the votes cast in Tuesday's election on Thursday afternoon, a committee spokeswoman announced. The spokeswoman said it would now take time to verify the counting and to upload the new numbers to the system. But Channel 12 reported that there were no new changes in the mandates of the parties since Thursday morning, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's camp with Yamina remained at 59 seats. The Likud won 30 seats, Yesh added 17, Shus 9 and Blue and White 8. There are 4 parties with 7 seats, Yamina, Labour, United Torah Judaism, and Yisrael Beitenu. The 4 parties with 6 seats are the Joint List, Meretz, New Hope and the Religious Zionist Party.
I was going to say, isn't it really sad how Labour now sit on just 7 seats, considering this was the party which governed Israel for over 30 years. Yeah. Yeah. Funny enough, the 2 major left-wing parties, Labour and I think it's Meretz, they both did increase their seat count, but not substantially, to make a vast difference. Now, well, let's go on with this article.
Ram, United Arab List, narrowly crossed the electoral threshold with 4 seats. New Hope leader Gideon Sar tweeted that it was now clear that Netanyahu could not build a coalition, so a government of change should be built. He said he would set aside his ego to allow that to happen. Earlier Thursday, religious Zionist Party leader MK Bezalel Smotrich has ruled out joining a government that is in any way supported by the Islamist Ram Party. With the final votes of the election still being counted but the likelihood that the political stalemate of the last 2 years will continue, Smotrich said that his ultranationalist party would not agree to a government that included Ram or relied on its support from outside the coalition. A right-wing government will not be established that is based on Mansour Abbas' Ram Party. Period. Not from within, not from outside, not through abstaining, and...
Well, from what I heard elsewhere, Netanyahu needs, 2 seats for the right wing to have a majority. It's 120 seats in the Knesset. So, yeah, 61 seats for a working majority. Sure, it's the most slender of slender majority. I think they will go into government with him. And some of these smaller far-right parties have some pretty odious views. They're ostensibly racist and also homophobic. Obviously racist towards the Palestinians and the Arab population, and homophobic, and I would imagine also transphobic, towards the LGBTQ community. So, let's get into this. This is an article from the Independent. Far-right party set to gain new influence of. Yeah, they basically will hold the balance of power. So it's now one of the things I would say is Netanyahu's tried to make a big deal out of supporting LGBTQ rights. But here's the problem. If these parties hold the balance of power and Netanyahu wants to stay in government, is he going to throw LGBTQ people under the bus? That's the question people have to fucking ask. So, let's, as I say, get into this.
An alliance of far-right groups including openly racist and homophobic candidates appears poised to enter Israel's parliament, possibly as an indispensable member of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's right-wing coalition, according to exit polls Tuesday. The religious Zionist party includes a new incarnation of the Kahanist movement, a Jewish extremist group outlawed as terrorists by Israel, the United States and other Western countries decades ago over its incitement to violence against Arabs.
Yeah, because that's all Israel needs, in fact any country needs, alert to the far right, not. These guys make Netanyahu look like he's extremely liberal. When in fact Netanyahu has his fascistic tendencies, I can tell you. The sad thing is, right, that Netanyahu, this is a guy, he's on trial for corruption at the moment, right? He's due back in court in a couple of weeks. And yet, he's essentially been returned to power by the Israeli electorate. There is something severely fucked up with that.
Jewish extremist group outlawed as terrorists by Israel, the United States and other Western countries decades ago over its incitement to violence against Arabs. Exit polls by Israel's 3 main television channels projected the religious Zionist party will win 6 to 7 seats, the best ever showing by an extreme right-wing party. With Netanyahu and his opponents deadlocked after 4 elections in 2 years, he will likely need the group if he succeeds in assembling a narrow majority in the 120-member Knesset, Israel's parliament. Its rise heralds a further shift to the right in Israel, where parties that support Jewish settlements and oppose the creation of a Palestinian state already dominate the political scene. A solidly right-wing government would likely find itself on a collision course with US President Joe Biden's administration, which has pressed for the revival of peace efforts.
Yeah. I mean, Netanyahu has said that he wants to annex parts of the West Bank. That is onerous and would contravene international law, but as if the Israeli government has ever given a shit about international law. And I mean, there are more. There are more UN resolutions against the Israeli government than any other government in the world, believe it or not. So you kind of think, well, why is nothing done about it? Well, the United States government basically protects. Now, the Israeli government. Now, you know, Biden, if he wants to make peace, you know, in the Middle East, and, you know, that's been the goal of many US presidents. And, you know, Bill Clinton came very, very close. Let's remember that. But with Netanyahu in government, as Prime Minister, with the backing of, you know, uber Zionist fucking religious nutcases, I just don't see it happening. And it's a really sad state of affairs.
The religious Zionist party is led by Bezalel Smotrich, a longtime activist and former transport minister who has organized anti-gay protests and recently compared gay marriage to incest. In 2016, he tweeted in support of segregating Jewish and Arab women in maternity wards, "It's only natural. My wife would not want to lie next to someone who just gave birth to a baby that might murder her baby in another 20 years. He wrote, he has also expressed hostility to more liberal strains of Judaism and said Israel should be governed by religious law. Please enter your email address. Please enter a valid email address. Please enter a valid email address. Sign UPI would like to be emailed about offers, events and updates from The Independent. Read our privacy notice. He is allied with Itamar Ben-Gvir, head of the far-right Jewish Power Party. He is a disciple of the late Rabbi Meir Cohen, who incited violence against Arabs, called for Israel to be governed by Jewish religious law and advocated the expulsion of Arabs and other non-Jews from Israel and the occupied territories. Joining him is the openly homophobic Noam faction, sponsored Ad Up Next Who Said It, sponsored Ad Up Next Who Said It. As a teenager in the 1990s, Ben-Gvir became active in the Cash movement founded by Cohen, who was assassinated by an Egyptian American in New York in...
As I say, these smaller parties have some pretty odious views towards the LGBTQ community. And, you know, obviously, me being LGBTQ, that's a concern. And obviously, you know, towards the Palestinian the population as well. This is a real concern, and how much influence they're going to have over Netanyahu, you know, who is basically trying to save his own political skin at the moment. I don't know what I can say. I mean, yesterday was a really miserable fucking political day. The news that Netanyahu had been returned to office, okay, fine, you know. It was expected, but then there was some other news. I found out about Labour, the Labour Party here in Britain. Anyways, there was an interesting article in the Electronic Intifada, which campaigns for Palestinian rights, about this election and 5 lessons from Israel's 5 lessons from Israel's election. Okay, so let's have a read of this. Wait, hold on, sorry. Okay, it doesn't seem to be. Right.
The final result from Israel's general election may not be known for another day or two until all the votes have been tallied. But with 90% counted already, a clear picture has emerged. Here are the electronic intifada's 5 main takeaways from the election. Netanyahu, the only likely PM. Benjamin Netanyahu may be deeply immersed in a trial on multiple corruption charges. He may have dragged Israelis to 4 elections in 2 years. And he may have held his political rivals, and the country, to ransom by refusing to pass a budget. But despite all that, this election result shows beyond doubt that no party leader is even close to Netanyahu in winning the confidence of Israelis. With most votes counted, his Likud party has 30 seats, nearly twice the number of its nearest rival, Yesh Atid, with 17 mandates. The rest of the pack, a further 11 parties, are jostling far behind, most of them at between 6 and 8 seats each. This election marks a historic victory for what in Israel is termed the right, but that comprises religious fundamentalist and far-right parties. Even in the most cautious assessment, this bloc won 72 seats in the 120-seat parliament. A further 25 seats belong to what Israelis consider the centre-right. But Netanyahu may still struggle to cobble together a government, given personal rivalries on the far right. He appears to have failed once again to muster enough seats among parties loyal to him to pass the 60-seat threshold. Nonetheless, Likud's massive lead will make it nigh impossible for any other leader, including Yair Lapid of the centre-right, Yesh Atid, to make a plausible case for forming an alternative government. Netanyahu will have to engage once again in complex bargaining to forge a tenuous governing coalition. He must entice Naftali Bennett, the leader of Yamina, a far-right settler party, into his fold, despite long-simmering tensions between the pair. But Netanyahu may still need a seat or 2 more, and that will probably require breaking apart another right-wing party. Or he may have another trick up his sleeve. See the entry on the Palestinian minority below. If not, Israel is heading towards a 5th election later this summer, with Netanyahu again remaining in charge as caretaker prime minister. The Kahanists' triumph, the big upset, at least for those Israelis invested in the idea that they live in a democracy, is that Israel's version of the Ku Klux Klan did far better than expected.
Yeah, now let me just say something here. So if Netanyahu isn't capable of getting together a coalition, I think he will be. Power is an aphrodisiac, shall we say. And I think that these smaller parties might think, we can, have influence over Netanyahu. Blah-de-blah-de-blah. And as I say, Netanyahu is basically fighting for his own political skin. So he might, give in to some of their demands, which wouldn't be good for LGBTQ people or Palestinians, or any Jew who isn't white, or any Jew, shall we say, who's of a liberal disposition. Though I did see the first Reform rabbi in Israel has been elected to the Knesset, which is a step in the right direction, I guess. If there is a 5th election, I think Israelis are going to start sort of muttering under their breath about, fascism or something which is fascistic being, more palatable. Because we've seen this time and time again when there is extremely weak government in a nation. And there are elections upon elections upon elections, and shit doesn't get done, and things fall into chaos because, of elections after elections, Basically, the strong man sort of comes about. Obviously, good example would be Hitler in the Weimar Republic, which had endless elections because the PR system they used was pretty shit. And obviously there's been other examples. I can't think of anything off the top of my head right this moment, but I do know this has happened before, in other countries. So that's kind of scary. I thought I should add that. Anyways, on with
the Kahanists triumph. The big upset, at least for those Israelis invested in the idea that they live in a democracy, is that Israel's version of the Ku Klux Klan did far better than expected. Jewish Powers leader, Itamar Ben-Gvir, is now in the Israeli parliament, and Netanyahu himself can take the credit. Desperate to win a clear majority for his far-right bloc, Netanyahu brokered an alliance between Ben-Gvir's party and two other, trenchantly Jewish supremacist, anti-Arab parties, to create a new list called Religious Zionism. Netanyahu hoped to nudge the list over the electoral threshold, which requires that any party wins votes equivalent to 4 seats. In the end, Religious Zionism's 6 seats place it on almost level pegging with the Labour Party, which founded Israel. Ben-Gvir, a disciple of the late Rabbi Meir Cohen, whose Cash Party was outlawed back in the 1990s and is treated as a terrorist organization by most Western states, is now in a strong bargaining position. Even if he can get Bennett on board, Netanyahu will need Ben-Gvir in the governing coalition. Horror of horrors, the leader of Israel's version of the Ku Klux Klan may even end up a government minister. That will be a very bad look. But Ben-Gvir probably won't find himself too far adrift ideologically from many other members of the Netanyahu cabinet. The Palestinian minority in trouble. The parties representing Israel's large minority of Palestinian citizens, a fifth of the population, had emerged in the previous 3 elections as the main stumbling block to Netanyahu forming a government. Sweeping them out of the way has been a key ambition of the Likud leader. The 4 Palestinian parties, together for the past 6 years in an electoral alliance known as the Joint List, became one of the largest blocs in the parliament. In the last election, a year ago, they won a record 15 seats. But this time they knew they were in trouble. Netanyahu managed to engineer a split by persuading the United Arab List, a conservative Islamic party, that it could do better out of the Joint List than in. Netanyahu rebranded himself as Abu Yeh during the campaign and promised that he was ready to shower the minority with post-election good.
Right, he'll throw them under the bus. As I say, it looks like they could have going to have 59 seats. They only need 2, 3, 4 more seats. They can get that from the religious Zionists and the Yamina. Yeah. Anyways.
Netanyahu rebranded himself as Abu Yeh during the campaign and promised that he was ready to shower the minority with post-election goodies if one of its parties was ready to do business.
Oops, sorry, hold on. Never goes smoothly on this stream.
Step in Mansour Abbas, the United Arab List's leader. In Netanyahu's script, this Abbas is expected to play a similarly accommodationist role to his namesake in the occupied West Bank, Mahmoud Abbas, head of the Palestinian Authority. That leaves the rest of the Joint List in the bogeyman role of Hamas. The gamble appears to have paid off. The Joint List has collapsed to 6 seats, just one above Abbas' United Arab List, after a significant drop in turnout among Palestinian citizens. A partially vindicated Mansour Abbas may now claim he has a mandate to negotiate with Netanyahu to help him create a government. That may not prove straightforward for Netanyahu given that his coalition will necessarily include the vehemently racist Religious Zionism. But any supporting role for Abbas in a Netanyahu government would deeply and dangerously split the Palestinian minority between those ready to do whatever it takes to gain a little influence in a self-declared Jewish state and those certain that they are being gamed in bad faith to endorse a government of occupiers. Navel-gazing from the Zionist left. What Israelis call the Zionist.
So, can I just point out that if a conservative Arab party, right, at the very least, they should support the Palestinians to have the right to self-determination, right? Yeah, they're getting into government with Netanyahu, a man who would never allow that. Yeah, so basically even some Arab parties are prepared to throw fucking Palestinians under the bus. What the fuck?
What Israelis call the Zionist left had been on the brink of political extinction in recent elections. This time it managed a minor turnaround. Between them, Labour and Meretz secured 12 seats, up from 6 just a year ago. But while some observers will trumpet this as a sign of the beginnings of a peace camp revival in Israel, that is a...
No. No. No, 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 no. No. It's... Yeah. It's sad. You see, like, Israel was essentially founded on socialist, Zionist principles, Zionist socialism, and has just seemed to have, just over the last 20 years has seemed to just lurch towards religious fundamentalism and, overt nationalism. And I'm not the only person who's sort of observed this and is saying this. Simon Sharma, the British historian, of course Jewish himself, has also said this. That he kind of felt that Israel when he was younger was a beacon, basically progressive thought and ideals. Yeah, it's really sad to see, particularly the left. Now, I know that there are some people who will say, well, the left in Israel is just going to be to support the Israeli state as much as any other. Well, yes, of course they're going to. Look, I have never disputed, and I will never dispute, the legitimacy of the state of Israel. It would be, obviously, he's anti-Semitic to do so, and it would just be fucking, ridiculous for me to do so, considering that, my father was Israeli, therefore, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the Israeli, for the foundation of the Israeli state. And secondly, I've always said that if there's a pogrom in Britain, seems unlikely at the moment, but you never know. Where do I go? The only safe harbour for me is Israel. Now, granted, I'm not sure I would, if some of these parties had the influence they would want to have on the far right, I wouldn't get, Israeli citizenship, despite the fact that all Jews have the right to return. Or supposed right to return. I mean, the thing is, I wasn't born in Israel, but, okay, I've got links to Israel. They wouldn't have, those far right parties wouldn't have me in because, I'm trans, I'm a lesbian, and I'm also, as red socialist. They don't like that, do they?
But while some observers will try...
I mean, here's the thing. The way to see this is that the far right in Israel are just as bad as the far right everywhere else. The only difference is they are, they won't you want to beat the shit out of you or kill you for being Jewish, but they'll still want to beat the shit out of you and kill you for being, LGBTQ or for being a socialist or a trade unionist. You get my drift?
But while some observers will trumpet this as a sign of the beginnings of a peace camp revival in Israel, that is a misreading. Labour and Meretz did not win votes by championing a peace process or negotiations with the Palestinians.
Yeah, let me just add something to that. It might, to those people outside Israel, and sort of, gaze on it at aghast at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Believe it or not, it's not actually a big issue when it comes to elections in Israel. Seriously, it's not. I know that sounds shocking, but it's not. It wasn't in this election, believe it or not. Yeah, I mean, sure, sometimes in the past it has been a bigger issue, but not this one. Not recently, no. I mean, the fact that the Netanyahu and his government has basically orchestrated an apartheid regime against the Palestinians, and the world looks on at horror. Yet, to most Israelis, it seems that they don't give a shit. I mean, they don't give a shit about the fact that Netanyahu is corrupt as fuck, for starters. It tells you everything. It tells you something, doesn't it?
In fact, as is now entirely normal during election campaigns, they did not talk at all about the Palestinians or the occupation. The Zionist left's minor success reflected two factors. The first was that no credible anti-Netanyahu, centrist, leader emerged to replace ex-General Benny Gantz, who betrayed his supporters in the last election by joining Netanyahu's government. Gantz scraped in with a greatly diminished 8 seats this time. With no center gravity for the anti-Netanyahu bloc, Labour and Meretz downplayed traditional political issues and emphasized identity politics instead. That appears to have paid off. Merav Michaeli, Labour's new leader, attracted many on the cultural left with her outspoken views by Israel's standards on feminism. And Nitzan Horowitz, Meretz's leader, who is openly gay, accentuated the LGBT agenda in ways that appeal to younger, more cosmopolitan voters.
Yeah, while we're on that subject, Freya in the chat has just mentioned this is a bit Netanyahu getting into bed with the religious nutcases is a bit like the Tories getting into bed with the DUP. Yeah, the one difference though is that I remember when the Tories got into bed with the DUP, Ruth Davidson, of course, was the leader of the Scottish Tories at the time, was straight on the phone to Theresa May to ensure that LGBTQ rights weren't compromised, because of course Ruth Davidson is openly an lesbian, an out lesbian. Sorry, I should say. So yeah, that's the one major difference here. As I've said, I'm worrying that Netanyahu, to save his own political skin, will throw LGBTQ people under the bus.
And Nitzan Horowitz, Meretz's leader, who is openly gay, accentuated the LGBT agenda in ways that appeal to younger, more cosmopolitan voters.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Finish off this.
Both benefited from the growing and explicit intolerance on the religious right, firmly embraced by Netanyahu and his Likud party. For the first time, Israel's parliament will include a representative from the aggressively homophobic Noam party, part of the new religious Zionism faction Netanyahu helped put together. For the cultural left, there are also celebrations that the next Knesset will include the first Reform rabbi, who stood as a Labour candidate. The parliament has always been full of rabbis. Israel is part theocracy, but previously they had only ever been drawn from the fundamentalist Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox streams. Palestinian.
I need to correct the electronic intifada there. Technically, and I do say this technically, it is a technical thing. Israel is actually a secular state. I know people say it's a Jewish homeland. Yeah, Jews. It is a homeland for Jews, but most Jews I know are pretty tolerant towards, people of other faiths, or other ethnic groups. It's just that the far right in Israel aren't, and obviously, as I keep repeating, that's who probably will now hold influence, sadly.
Palestinians out of the picture, again. Yet again, the Palestinians under occupation will bear the brunt of the election result. And yet again, they had no say in its outcome. In fact, the nearest the Palestinians got to a voice on election day itself was a single rocket fired harmlessly out of the Gaza Strip as Netanyahu campaigned in nearby Beersheba. With the triumph of the far right in Israel, the backing of peace partners in the Gulf, and no likely obstruction from the White House, whoever its occupant, the Palestinians have become a non-issue. The political consensus on the dominant Israeli right is that there will be no Palestinian state and that the occupation is permanent.
Right, let me tell you something. The Palestinians should have their own state, okay? There should be no equivocation. They have the right to self-determination. You know, that's it, okay? You know, they have been robbed of their dignity for years. You know, I prefer people to what Anthony Bourdain said. And it's sickening.
Formal annexation of the West Bank is on the horizon too.
As I said, yes, that's something Netanyahu keeps floating. And of course, now with, you know, and that's just going to cause, you see, the thing is, that's just going to cause more fucking strife. It doesn't do, you know, Israelis any good. It really doesn't. Because there's such a thing as blowback. So, you know, you keep poking and poking and poking at people, they're going to have a swipe at you. Right? And, you know, I do believe there can be a better Israel where you know, there is diversity and equality. You know, but, you know, just...
Formal annexation of the West Bank is on the horizon too. The differences on the right are only over when it happens, how much territory is seized and how the move will be sold abroad. For the first time, the voice of Palestinians under occupation was also marginalized among the Palestinian minority in Israel. With Mansour Abbas split from the joint list, internal divisions predominated. If Abbas does indeed decide to support Netanyahu, whether from inside or outside the government, it will be a bitter additional blow. Jonathan Cook won the Martha Gellhorn Special Prize for Journalism. His latest...
Yeah, so, yeah, it's a one big clusterfuck. That's what it is. It's clusterfuck, yeah, and I'm, you know, as I said, yesterday was not a good day for news, political news. So we have to move back to Britain, and well, apparently now Labour MPs support police brutality. I'll let Navarro Media explain.
To violence at protests, people on the left will often disagree. Some will see riots as a legitimate response to state violence. Others will think violence is always wrong. Many will see protesters burning vans and smashing windows as no moral disaster, but rather a public relations one. These are all options which are widespread on the left. I think we can have productive disagreement about these questions. What you don't normally see among progressives, though, is applauding cops as they swing batons at crowds. But that's what Labour's Shadow Minister for Further Education did this afternoon. Now, he quote-tweeted a video by journalist Billy Stockwell of clashes between cops and protesters at Bristol's march against the policing bill, and wrote, this is Toby Perkins, "This looks to me like entirely appropriate use of the baton, a good example of proportionate policing under extreme pressure. Well done," with 3 clapping emojis. Now let's take a look at the video, which Perkins thinks was a great example of proportionate policing, worthy of a round of applause. Now, whatever your position about policing and protest, you want to abolish the cops, do you think the cops do a good job? I think the idea of clapping at that situation, which, you know, it looks quite difficult for everyone involved, actually, but seeing that as something to celebrate, I think just seems completely sadistic. I mean, there's someone really swinging his baton, people really getting hurt. I mean, to me, that doesn't look particularly defensive if you're swinging your baton like that.
Yeah, I think Toby Perkins is mistaken the Labour Party for the British Union of Fascists. And it gives a whole new take on when Keir Starmer said that people should dress smartly. Does he mean in black shirts and jack boots? Yeah. Yeah, is he what? Is he? Never mind wanting to be the new Clement Attlee. I think Keir Starmer now and wants Labour to be. Well, he wants to be Oswald Mosley, and for the black shirts to fucking return to fucking Gable Street by the sounds of it.
It's not someone holding up their shield. That's a real, that could cause real damage. And you've got a Labour MP here, shadow minister, and a shadow minister who represents young people, shadow minister for further education, and he's giving a round of applause as a cop hits a protester with a baton. Now, obviously, that didn't cause any controversy today. The tweet that caused controversy, or actually it was an interview that caused controversy, was Nadia Whittome saying, actually, maybe I want to work out what the facts are before I start condemning people. That's seen as beyond the pale.
Yeah. Yes. I remember reading the Daily Mail article on that. With all their self-righteous indignation. Oh, how dare someone actually, say, I want to hear from both sides. Funny enough, I was speaking to sort of like a more moderate, less sort of lefty yesterday, and even they said, why the fuck is no one asking why people were rioting? Why aren't they asking the rioters, why they're angry? Yeah, well, my conclusion on that one is that, there isn't an oppositional voice. There isn't a voice of opposition to the Tories, because fucking Keir Starmer, he doesn't offer any fucking opposition, which we'll get onto in a minute. But it's like, what the... that's why. And they sort of said, oh, no, we'd just say if Jeremy Corbyn had been leader. No, I don't think so. I think that, particularly when Corbyn was leader, we knew that this was a guy who was a socialist, who was a progressive, who basically did speak up for us small people, and I think that we're going to look back on Jeremy Corbyn's time as Labour leader as some sort of golden era. I know this is going to sound weird to some people because Labour lost 2 general elections to Jeremy Corbyn, but the point I'm trying to make is the left, as a movement, was more united when Corbyn was Labour leader than it had ever been in my lifetime. Right? That's what I mean. People often seem to think that politics is just electoral politics. No, it's not. That's something that people need to grasp. And Corbyn, he got people. He got infused. People with wanting to make a change. Starmer's just boring. At the very least, boring people. And the other thing he's doing, which is dangerous for Labour, actually, is that he's actually putting progressive voters off voting Labour. Yeah. People, he seems to think that he needs to worry about what, the focus group of Karens in Tunbridge Wells has to say. Well, I think he needs to worry about progressive voters in marginal seats staying at home rather than going to the polling station. He needs to think about that. I think Labour could actually lose more seats because of that.
A Labour MP who's giving a round of applause for a cop hitting someone with a stick, that's completely acceptable.
Because we're heading for fucking fascism. We're slipping into a fucking fascism in this country. We really are.
They're saying Nadia Whittome should lose the whip. This guy, no one's even saying he should be forced to apologise or resign from the front bench.
Pathetic, isn't it? When you see somebody cheering on.
Oh yeah, and let's also remember that Rebecca Long Bailey was sacked from the front bench for tweeting a link to an interview with Maxine Peake where she was questioning the tactics used by the Minneapolis police in the handling of George Floyd and, basically murdering him. And yet, hey, doesn't have a problem with and that coupled together with Toby Perkins basically applauding fucking police plundering people. It's kind of scary with Keir Starmer, isn't it? As I said, I think that Keir Starmer wants to turn Labour into the British Union of fascists sometimes.
On bullying which is being done by other people. There's something about that which I just find so unchic. Do you know what I mean? It's just so...
I don't find it unchic. I don't find it unfashionable. I find it fucking repugnant. But why should we be fucking surprised, huh? Let's just remember when Keir Starmer was the director of public prosecutions, he refused to prosecute cops who shot innocent people.
So kind of pathetic. You're clapping from the sidelines at, these kind of, puffed up, drunk on their own power cops swing baton around.
Yeah, it's something I would expect a fucking fascist to do. I've seen reaction videos of fascists basically, loving it when they see, riot police fucking kick the shit out of fucking, protesters. This is the same fucking thing.
But batons around. That's not. I don't think that it's becoming of a shadow cabinet minister. Not just on the politics of it, which are of course atrocious, but just because it's so pathetic. It's like Randall, the school snitch from Recess. You don't even have the kind of gumption to do it yourself, but you're kind of, in the sidelines going, oh, I approve of this. It's also come to my attention that Toby Perkins has said some pretty offensive things in relation to the GRT community. He said that he wouldn't want a traveller's account.
Oh, there's a fucking surprise. Yeah. Why? And let me tell you something, right? You'd think that Labour would speak up for gypsies, Roma, and travellers, wouldn't you? No. We're going to get into that in a bit later.
Encampment to set up near him. He apologised afterwards after there was an outcry from the GRT community. But when you sort of put those two things together, the applauding of indiscriminate baton strikes against protesters who are there in part because of a bill which will criminalise and really crack down on the GRT community, I wonder if there are some connections here, if not consciously, but then unconsciously, about a kind of desire to see more authoritarian measures from the state against those who are deemed to be, disruptive and criminal.
So it's disruptive and criminal. So basically, well, we know the Tories seem to think that anyone who protests is disruptive and criminal, don't we? So now Labour are seeming to be going down that route. Well, taking our right to protest away. One Labour MP, of course, has stood up and said, that the government really needs to, because at the moment with COVID-19 restrictions, technically people don't have the right to protest. But Diane Abbott has said that needs to be reinstated. And you can have protests with people socially distancing and wearing masks. And plus also, a lot of, I don't know how many million it is now, but last time it was over 20 million people have had the first dose of the vaccine. Look, I don't agree with all protests that are happening at the moment. I mean, I saw that in London this past weekend, there was an anti-lockdown protest, and none of them were wearing masks. None of them were wearing. None of them were socially distancing, right? And for now that still is dangerous. However, at the same time, there was actually a protest down in Brixton. It was organised by Stand Up to Racism, and they showed that you can, and you can show that you can have a protest where people, you know, are socially distancing, wearing masks. And funny enough, there was only 2 policemen there. Yeah. There were scuffles at the anti-lockdown protest. Well, there's a surprise. And I know that there are some people who have very deep concerns about the lockdown. And sure, I'm starting to have more concerns now than I did, because it seemed to make sense to me that the lockdown measures, first of all, right? And sure, when there wasn't a vaccine, when, you know, we were seeing an exponential, increase in the number of people getting COVID-19 and dying, you know, I think it was needed. But what I'm saying now is there has to come a point where we start thinking, right, is this needed anymore? You know, I'm saying for the time being that it would be advisable that people, you know, did adhere to COVID restrictions. But, you know, a couple of things. First of all, the weather's starting to warm up a little. And, you know, before long, summer will be here. And there will be a dip in COVID rates, partly because it's warmer weather. And secondly, because most people would have had their first and second doses of the vaccine. Now, the vaccines are not foolproof, right? But it would certainly lessen the risk. I'm just saying that I'm starting to think to myself that maybe we need to start being a bit more questionable about extending lockdowns and restrictions and stuff. Yeah, I'm not saying they shouldn't go. You know, we shouldn't have them at all. But, you know, please, you know, my response to all this is nuanced. It's not like, you know, I'm anti-lockdown. I'm not. Okay, so the Dorset Eye seemed to have figured out what I figured out ages ago. Was Keir Starmer a Tory party selection? I actually did say, I don't know if I said it on stream, I definitely said it on Twitter, that I said that if I was a Tory strategist, I would have dreamed, basically, Keir Starmer would have been a wet dream for them. So let's have a read of this. It's not too long, thankfully.
Just a reminder, Keir Starmer does not think, despite courts proving corruption, Matt Hancock should resign. Despite investigations showing the Robert Jenrick corruption, Starmer does not think he should resign and actually supports the same man either directly taking charge, or indirectly via civil servants, commissioners, of Liverpool Council. Starmer also does not think Priti Patel should resign re the Met farce. Starmer does not think Cressida Dick should resign as Chief of Police. In fact, he literally covered for her and refused to prosecute others for cold-blooded murder of a completely innocent man, when he was DPP. Starmer also, via DPP position and or abstentions now, covered and refused to prosecute other murders, and rape and pretty much everything else that is as evil as humankind can be. He has also openly broken the law, the EHRC, the Labour rules, the PLP rules to such an extent, he proudly said it on live radio last week on Radio 2. Oh, and he refused and went against Labour's legal advice on these matters. He promoted alleged bullies and racists, and has suspended more Jewish members than any leader. Oh, and, of course, he is a literal fascist internally, destroyed the trust completely with the majority of our black, Muslim, Kashmiri, Asian, Palestinian, trans-disabled comrades, who have left in droves. All with almost total media silence and complete impunity. Now, tell me why you support this. Tell me why you support this abomination. Tell me how is this better than the Tories. Tell how you can stay silent and ignore this. Tell me why it's not okay for other people to act like this, but it is for Starmer. Finally, if you know all this and still support Starmer, tell me this: what the actual F***K are you doing in the Labour Party? And genuinely, please tell me how you sleep at night and how you are not an actual psychopath to know all this and still support Starmer.
Yeah, I completely agree with every word that's said there. Except, why the fuck do you blank out? I don't get it. We all know what you're saying. Fuck. You know? What the actual fuck? Yeah, I mean, considering that the majority of the party membership supported Jeremy Corbyn, you kind of think that they would be alarmed, those who have remained, about Starmer, and would start to try and kick up a fuss. Now, one thing I will say is possibly this is because people are scared of being expelled. But really, yeah, do you really want to be in a part? You can't keep quiet about this. You just can't. The guy is a fucking fascist, and this is not what the Labour Party is about. It really isn't, and I am really concerned now. You know, with everything which has been going on. I think Labour will do pretty getting in a word salad. I think Labour are going to do disastrous at the local elections. I certainly won't be voting for them. I will reveal to people who I will be voting for tomorrow or the next time I stream. Hopefully it will be tomorrow. It's a really sad state of affairs. And of course, some people are still going to try and blame Jeremy Corbyn. Well, if it wasn't for Corbyn, none of this would be happening. Really? You can't keep blaming Corbyn for fucking everything which is wrong with the Labour Party. This is Starmer's making, and he needs to take responsibility. And the only words I want to hear out of his mouth is, I resign. There you are. Now, there is one group of people in Labour who are principled people. I should explain, I always have to explain this. There are two Jewish groups in the Labour Party. There is the Jewish Labour Movement, who are the pro-Zionist group of Jews affiliated with the Labour Party. And then there's Jewish Voice for Labour, who are the anti-Zionist. They are concerned about the policing bill and, well, the effect it is going to have on the Gypsy, Roma and traveller communities. So let's us get into this.
JVL Introduction. We have been sent the following petition and are happy to endorse its views and to support its call for signatories. We understand that it comes from a young student at Warwick University. It says, we, the undersigned, call on the government to drop its proposal for the criminalisation of trespass with immediate effect and consult with Gypsy and traveller communities on any future policy proposal. There is a list of reference at the end of the petition. We would particularly commend the first item there, viz. discrimination facing Gypsies, Roma and travellers in the UK today. The petition is called An Open Letter to the Home Secretary from British Jews. You can sign it here. An open letter to the Home Secretary from British Jews. Dear Secretary of State, we are writing to you as Jews in solidarity with the UK's Gypsy and traveller communities to oppose the government's unwarranted and discriminatory proposals to make trespass a criminal offence. The Home Office's proposed policing and crime bill will make intentional trespass with vehicles a criminal offence, potentially exposing those prosecuted to up to 3 months in prison. This poses a threat to the rights of all UK citizens, limiting liberties and increasing police powers. Crucially, this law will disproportionately impact Gypsy and traveller communities, who are recognised as an ethnic group under the Equality Act. It is a threat to the human rights of an already marginalised group. Despite having been a part of British life since before the 16th century, Gypsy and traveller communities face discrimination and racism in many areas of life. This includes education, healthcare, policing and employment. 1. However, perhaps the most stark aspect of the inequality faced by Gypsy and traveller communities is in housing. 2. Whilst in the UK, the majority of Gypsies and travellers live in permanent housing, a significant proportion, around 25%, 3, live in caravans or other mobile structures. In accordance with their culture and traditional way of life, as is their human right. 4. A nomadic lifestyle is an important cultural tradition for Gypsy and traveller communities, which the proposed law would criminalise without providing another legal option. To quote the Friends, Families and Travellers (FFD) charity, it would punish people for the crime of having nowhere else to go. 5. Criminalising a form of homelessness. 73% of people asked by the government expect that criminalising unauthorised encampments would have a negative impact on the health or educational outcomes of Gypsy and traveller communities.
Right, let me explain that. The Tories have always had a hard-on for persecuting Gypsies. I don't want to show you the fucking footage from the Battle of Beanfield from 1985 again. Yeah, just in case YouTube thinks it's too graphic. But the thing is, Gypsies are one of the most marginalised and persecuted groups in this country. And it might surprise some people, but Jews have always, well, as long as I can remember, have always, basically defended the rights of Gypsies. I don't know if it goes back before the Holocaust, but certainly since the Holocaust, because though more Jews were killed in the Holocaust, a larger proportion of Gypsies and Roma and travellers were killed. In other words, bigger percentage of the overall population of Gypsies were killed. And I have to say that Labour don't have a good record when it comes to sticking up for the rights, speaking up for Gypsies. Now, this goes back to 10 years ago when Ed Miliband was Labour leader and the kerfuffle there was at Dale Farm. So I guess I'm going to have to explain Dale Farm. So Dale Farm was a Gypsy site which was actually owned by the Gypsies themselves. I think they were Irish travellers. And essentially, on one part of the lot, they had built some structures and hadn't got planning permission. So basically, the council moved in to evict people, despite the fact that they owned the land. This was largely motivated by a neighbour who was a racist piece of shit. I mean, he just was. I remember some of the shit he said. It was, and this hit international headlines. I remember because I remember there was some libertarian friends of mine going in America, and what the fuck is going on with this? And they obviously had sympathy with the Gypsies, and I did as well because it's like this, right? Yeah, okay, they didn't get planning permission, to build whatever it was built there, but the thing is, right? Here's how it works, right? Tesco's want to build a superstore. It's nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Here's a large envelope full of £50 notes under the table for the local county councillors or borough councillors, whoever gives the planning permission. Obviously Gypsies can't afford to do that. That's how it fucking works, right? And that's Gypsies get left out. Now, the reason I say they haven't got a good record is I actually remember, right, I'll have to try and explain this. So Emily Brothers, and you can look her up, she's a disabled trans prominent trans disabled member of the Labour Party. She stood for Parliament and everything. And I remember saying to her that I remembered Dale Farm and that Ed Miliband had called for the evictions. And she said, "Oh, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. No, he didn't." Well, here we are. Ed Miliband supports evictions. Yeah, this is what he did when he was leader. I remember this. And I was thinking, what the fuck? Yeah? Yeah. And as I say, the Jewish community have often defended gypsies. Now, the Jewish Chronicle is known for being quite conservative, right? And obviously, I'm not a great fan of the Jewish Chronicle, considering all the shit they published about Jeremy Corbyn. And I still maintain he's not an anti-Semite, right? But when it came to sticking up for gypsies at Dale Farm, they did, right? And I have to give them kudos for that. It was the right call, right? As I said, there has been this link with Jews and gypsies, the Jewish community, and the gypsy community. Both persecuted minorities over centuries. Anyways, the reason I'm bringing this up is because this new policing bill could further persecute gypsies, Roman and traveller people, and it's like, where's the opposition to this from Labour? Well, I've kind of already explained why. Labour doesn't seem to give a shit anything. I mean, would Jeremy Corbyn have spoken up against this police? Of course he would have. He would have. Yeah. Anyways, one reason Keir Starmer isn't interested in speaking out for gypsies is like Boris Johnson. He's too busy fucking flag shagging. So here we are. The government buildings will now fly the Union Jack continuously. Oh, wow. So what? That's what my first. It's like, does that really make a fucking difference? I mean, all this flag shagging bullshit, it's just a big fucking distraction from all the other crap which is going on, which the Tories need to be challenged about. Okay? I mean, what is next? Is flying the government, flying the flag, the Union Jack on government buildings, which I thought was already the case. I'd have thought that. Next is it that we've got all wanking over a Union Jack once a day. Is that it? Is that the next thing? Yeah. I mean, if your identity is wrapped up in a piece of fucking material, you are extremely sad. You really fucking are. Yeah? Yeah, I don't get it. I just don't fucking get it. How, the Union Jack represents my identity. Does it? Well, I thought you represent your identity. Who you are. Not a fucking flag. Not a piece of fucking material. Yeah. Anyways. You want some flag shaggers? Here's some flag shaggers. 2 paedophiles and 2 fascists. There you are. They were proud to wave the Union Jack, weren't they? Yeah. 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 Of course, Nigel Farage, pompous racist twat, making speeches about women cycling to evening song on a warm summer's evening. and warm beer and cricket on the village green and jam roly-poly for tea and none of that metric measurement nonsense, even though it makes far more fucking sense than fucking imperial measurements. I mean, you know, it's all like this, you know, I'm proud to be British, you know, so I'm going to wave a Union Jack. What the fuck does being proud to be British mean? What's Britishness? You know? Yeah, I've often thought that. Actually, I'll tell you something. Right? It might sound completely fucking irrelevant, right? But there is that cookery show, Great British Menu, right? And it's always going to cause some chef cooking a dish that's not British. Yeah, I definitely think that if the fascists ever gain power, or the Tories do become full-on fascists, there'll be a Ministry of Food. So, you won't be allowed to buy certain foods because they're not British. I always love it when fascists say to me, "Oh, I don't like that foreign muck," while tucking into a Big Mac. Anyways, as I said, this is just a big fucking distraction. Right, and the Canary have an article about this. So, let's have a read.
The Tories want to bury their failures under a mountain of Union Jacks.
It's flags, flags, and more flags. And when it isn't flags, it's Winston Churchill's fairy tale greatness. In its latest distraction measure, the Tory government has announced all government buildings should fly the Union Jack at all times. A vast change from only flying it quite a lot of the time. The government also wants council buildings to fly the butcher's apron. Only the north of Ireland, for now, appears to have been spared the authoritarian Tory flag edict. It's an odd move given that the flag is very often flown from government buildings as it is.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Freya, I thought he was Lebanese, St. George. I thought that was my understanding. But yeah, point well made. I mean, St. George came from the Middle East. So yeah, you always get the fucking white supremacists wanted to march on St. George's Day, and wank over the Union Jack, not realising that St. George was, Middle Eastern. Anyways, let's continue with this
Party
article.
captured some of the specifics. Under instructions issued to government personnel by the Digital, Culture, Media, and Sport Department, the Union Jack should be displayed every day, unless there is already a flag on display to mark a special event. The guidance will take effect in summer. The government is also encouraging all local councils to fly the flag. Under the current...
I know they're going to be, fucking gamma go, well, it's patriotic, fly the flag. I'll tell you what's fucking patriotic, right? Ensuring that we have an NHS, ensuring we have good education, ensuring we have decent public services, ensuring that, we have a welfare state, ensuring that, the police actually keep the peace and don't cause fucking strife. Things like that. Human rights, tolerance, diversity, stuff which, funny enough, Jeremy Corbyn, spoke up for, but I was all often more often than not called unpatriotic.
Rules, the Union flag is only required to come out during days of national significance, such as the Queen's birthday. The guidance will not apply to Northern Ireland. Ties that bind us? Culture Secretary Oliver Dowden told the press on the 24th of March that the government had decreed the Union Jack, a proud reminder of our history and the ties that bind us.
A proud reminder of our history, yes, of colonialism, slavery, subjugation, persecution, genocide. Shall I go on? Yeah, that's a history to be fucking proud of, isn't it? Yeah.
Should be flown at all times from government buildings.
Do you know that in Ireland they actually call the Union Jack the butcher's apron? Yeah, that's more appropriate if you ask me.
Announcement follows a number of flag-related incidents. The latest was a row on the 18th of March over BBC presenter Charlie States' quip that Tory Minister Robert Jenrick's flag wasn't as big as it could be.
She should have said flagpole. Robert Jenrick, right? He looks like if you've ever seen pictures of him, he looks like the kid at school who likes sticky buns. Seriously, he does. Yeah, the naughty kid who likes sticky buns. That's what it is. It's just fucking. It's just one great big fucking distraction to avert the gaze from the fact that the Tories have continuously fucked up in their response to COVID-19 and every fucking thing else. Now, if the Tory... Right, so... The NHS staff in Scotland are to be offered a 4% pay rise, which is 3% higher than NHS staff south of the border are going to be getting. Of course, if the Tories weren't so busy maybe the Tories should support the NHS staff rather than indulge in fucking flag shagging. Yeah? Look, if the Scottish government can afford to give NHS staff above inflation pay rise, then I don't know. Some wise ass is going to say, well, actually, technically, the 1% pay rise is actually above what the rate of inflation is at the moment. Yeah, the rate of inflation at the moment. But when the economy, opens up more, after lockdown, right, the rate of inflation is going to go up, right? So technically, that 1% pay rise is actually going to be a pay cut, right? Now, this is more substantial. If the Scottish government can afford to give NHS workers this pay rise, then so can the Tories in England. Okay, just gonna say that, all right? And I am sure that most people would fucking agree with that. I just think that the 1% pay rise offered by the Tories was just a fucking insult. It really was. We know many of you have died or have gotten sick with COVID-19. Many of you got stressed with having to deal with COVID-19. Blah de blah de blah de blah de blah. Now here's a kick in the teeth. Right. Also, Liz Truss has said yet again that the Tories are going to get rid of conversion therapy.
But just to be clear, you would now wish to reassure the trans community that when you bring forward your proposals, they won't be restricted to simply people of sexual orientation. They will also apply to the trans community.
I'm very clear that we want to make sure that transgender people are free to live their lives and don't face the type of horrific conversion therapy that currently has been going on here in the UK.
Did Liz Truss's nose grow an inch when she said that? Look, if you weren't so busy flag shagging, maybe you could get around to, I don't know, banning conversion therapy. I mean, you keep fucking saying you're going to ban conversion therapy. We've had this for the last 3 fucking years. Why can't you just fucking do it? Yeah, I'm sick and tired of this. Just fucking do it. Anyways, one other story related to Parliament to do with transphobia is John Nicholson, who's a SNP MP. When I praised, he tweeted this, when I praised a young trans constituent of mine who bravely spoke of her life last year, the sinister LGBT Alliance offered rewards of retweets to anyone who donated money to it in my name, I was, as a result, deluged by abuse. Twitter has failed to act against this hate group. Yeah, well, he's right to identify the LGBT Alliance as a hate group.
Politicians aren't, of course, meant to moan or weaken.
Sorry. Yeah, the LGBT Alliance is a hate group and should be considered as such by all organisations, including the BBC. But they don't currently. So, in fact, they're more than happy to give the LGBT Alliance a platform. We'll get to that. There's been another incident of it. So, yeah, the LGBT Alliance are made up of neo-Nazis and TERFs, essentially. And they're not just hateful towards trans people; they're also hateful to the rest of the LGBTQ community. I mean, they oppose things like same-sex marriage. Anyways, let's have a listen to what John Nicholson says.
Get called self-indulgent, but we all know the shocking abuse sent to women politicians in particular. When the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, revealed personal details of tragic miscarriages she'd suffered, she was deluged by trolls mocking her or saying that she was lying about her family grief. A Hollywood magazine survey found that a third of MSPs had received a death threat, with a third of female MSPs receiving a threat of a sexual nature in addition. Before the 2019 election, a survey showed that many female MPs who were not standing again cited the abuse they received online as a major factor in their decision. Misogyny, homophobia, and racism have always sadly been a part of politics, but they're now magnified by the perfect poisonous storm, a huge worldwide audience and anonymity. I've had a wee taste of it myself recently. I praised online a young trans constituent of mine last year who'd bravely spoken of her life in a BBC documentary. Almost instantly, a sinister organisation called the LGBT Alliance began trolling me. They offered the reward of a retweet to anyone who donated money to it in my name. I was, as a result, deluged by abuse from anonymous accounts. I was called a rape enabler, a misogynist, and although I'm an openly gay man, a homophobe. As an openly gay man, I was also called a greasy bender. The organisation concerned, the LGBT Alliance, was thrown off the country's two largest crowdfunders as a hate group. But Twitter wouldn't take their count down, despite clearly and egregiously violating Twitter's own rules. Now, I'm a man in my 50s. The experience wasn't pleasant, but I was acutely conscious of all the young trans people reading the venom and despairing. They have, after all, been subjected to a vile online onslaught in recent weeks and months.
Yeah. Agree with everything he said. And I do remember that, when Nicola Sturgeon talked about the miscarriages she's had, and people saying that she was lying, including politicians, by the way. That was absolutely, repulsive. And of course, Nicola Sturgeon has been cleared of breaching any Scottish rules in the whole Alex Salmond affair. And Alex Salmond, if you want my opinion on Alex Salmond, he's just acting like a narcissistic, spoiled brat. Okay? He should realize, he should just, basically, Alex Salmond should just waddle off the fucking stage and enjoy retirement. Okay? That's just my opinion, right? I think Nicola Sturgeon's A-okay. So, yeah, as I said, the BBC thinks it's fine to invite two straight cis men and the LGBT Alliance to debate conversion therapy. Right, so yet again, I mean, this is in Ulster. Oh, God. Northern Ireland. What the fucking fuck? Hey, I'm half expecting the BBC to have a debate about the Jewish community and invite the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan on. I mean, this is the equivalent. I mean, this is not the first time that they've not actually had anyone from the LGBTQ community to discuss LGBTQ issues. I remind people that I did a whole stream with Kevin Logan about a Newsnight report about the Kira Bell case against the Tavistock, where they didn't have a single trans person on that segment. It's, I don't know. I mean, look, I've heard rumours about what's happening at the BBC. TERFs have basically taken over the women's department and have gone around bullying other departments, saying that, if they the only way they're going to speak up for women is to basically throw trans people under the bus. Well, there's something more sinister seems to be going on. And, because this isn't just about trans people. This is about, gays and lesbians and bisexual people as well, and queer people. So, fucking hell. I mean, it's really, news story after news story is not good news at the moment. I think I've got 2 good news stories today, but, it's small fucking comfort. So, yeah, why does this not fucking surprise me? Weatherspoon's worker sacked for calling transgender colleague a thing and it. I mean, Weatherspoons are such fucking class, aren't they, I of course, there's been that story in the news today that possibly people might have to have a vaccine passport to buy a pint. I actually think there should be an IQ test before you buy a pint. And I mean, if you've got any, sizable IQ, you would be clever enough to never go near a fucking Weatherspoons in your fucking life. Yeah, I don't like Weatherspoons. Yeah, so let's listen to this.
A Weatherspoons kitchen assistant has been fired for gross misconduct after calling transgender colleague a thing and it. An employment tribunal heard the details of the Weatherspoons worker's behavior this week, after he was fired and subsequently claimed he was unfairly dismissed. Andrew Rush worked at the Standard Bearer Weatherspoons pub in Stevenage, Hertfordshire. But, in January 2020, manager Keane Sutherland received a complaint about him using transphobic, sexist and racist language, according to the Mirror. Kitchen manager Sophie Quinlan made a complaint in the branch's managers WhatsApp group, describing how Rush misgendered a colleague named Ollie, a trans man, but when he realized his mistake went on to refer to him as thing, and it. She wrote, Andrew asked another colleague if he knew why Ollie was back and accidentally said she, and then he was like, oh FFS, he, her thing whatever it is. Why is thing back? Quinlan also described cruel teasing by staff, who told Ollie that a female staff member, Ariana Kadira, was interested in a relationship with him. Ollie believed them, and even asked her out on a date, but Kadira was actually in a relationship with Rush.
I guess I should be thankful for small mercies that this guy was actually sacked by Weatherspoons. But his opinion, I have to say, is pretty typical of those of a good number of people who drink in Weatherspoons. Believe me, Weatherspoons is the favourite pub of the racist gammon, and it really is. And considering Tim Martin is a complete and utter wanker, he's the guy, he's Weatherspoon's CEO. Well, of course, he was his founder as well. And a guy who walked out of an interview with Owen Jones, of all people. I mean, look, I've said before that Owen, I wouldn't say he's a lightweight, but I would say that, he's not exactly Jeremy fucking Paxman. And Tim Martin couldn't even have I can handle that. Yeah, fuck. I was actually hoping, I really was hoping that Weatherspoons would actually, the lockdown would put pay to Weatherspoons, that they would actually go bust. And I know some people saying, well, there'll be all those job losses. Well, fucking Tim Martin sacked the fucking staff anyways, didn't he? So, I hate Weatherspoons with a passion, right? Because every fucking time I walk past my local Weatherspoons and there's a bunch of fucking gammon outside having a cigarette, I get abuse, right? And I don't say anything to them. I just walk past them, minding my own fucking business. Yeah? So, there's a sort of an associated story. Pubs and clubs urged to let trans people pee in peas in a major new bathroom campaign. Oh, TERFs are not going to like this.
Pubs, clubs and bars are being urged to make their toilets safer for trans people and more accessible to people of all genders by a feminist group that works to prevent sexual violence. The call to provide gender-inclusive toilets comes after the government began a review of toilet provision, a move that was widely criticized by LGBT+ groups for being hostile to trans and non-binary people.
Yeah, and I should remind people that Liz Truss dog whistles to TERFs. She was in front of a parliamentary committee last year, and she said protecting women's only spaces is a concern. That's a dog whistle towards TERFs, I can tell you.
The Good Night Out campaign, which works with venues to create safer nightlife, partnered with LGBT+ anti-violence charity Gallop on the toolkit to promote gender-inclusive toilets. The guidance aims to combat misinformation, like the transphobic myth that gender-neutral toilets are dangerous, and support better access to safe loos for everyone. Trans people have always used the toilet that fits their gender, and this was enshrined as a right under the 2010 Equality Act. But increasingly hostile transphobia in the UK means that many venues that have introduced all-gender bathrooms have been met with backlash, often spearheaded by anti-trans campaigners who promote misinformation about safety and cues. A report from Gallup in 2020 found that as a result, half of trans people in the UK are too afraid to use public...
Yeah, right, okay. First of all, me using public toilets. I'm lucky in the sense that I have a key, because I'm disabled. I actually do have the skeleton key, which opens up most disabled toilets in this country. But, and I've had that for, a long time before I transitioned. I think I've had it since the 1990s. So, yeah, still the same one. But obviously there are times when there isn't a disabled toilet available, so I have to use the women's toilets, and I usually run in and run back out. I do not like using female public toilets at all, in case I get shit. That it is a concern, and I would imagine every trans woman and has that fear. And as for the disinformation, here's the thing: why is there never any pushback when you hear these TERFs, in the media, go on about how this all, if you allow trans women into female-only spaces, then there's a high potential of rape and sexual assault and stuff. Why is there why is it that no interviewer basically says proof? Because guess what? There's fuck all.
A report from Gallup in 2020 found that as a result, half of trans people in the UK are too afraid to use public toilets. Brian E. Bainan, director of the Good Night Out campaign, said, "We know sexual harassment and assault are deeply gendered, impacting women and LGBTQ+ people disproportionately. However, enforcing gender norms by policing bathrooms through compulsory segregation or assuming where someone should be does not prevent violence and can actually help create a conducive context for it. Given the atmosphere of fear and disinformation, we wanted to cut through the noise and provide some caring, common-sense guidance on this issue. What's more, when bathroom options that work for everyone help trans, non-binary and gender non-conforming visitors to feel safer and more welcome, that makes business sense too.
Yeah, it does. You know,
Pubs and clubs urge to let trans people.
Oh, fuck off. So, anyways, I was going to say, funny enough, the first gender-neutral toilet I ever went into, and there are a few, not talking about disabled toilets here, which are technically gender-neutral, was actually in the Marlborough pub in Brighton. Now, for those who don't know, the Marlborough pub is a very famous LGBTQ pub in Brighton. It was and I actually remember this very well because I went to Trans Pride, which I usually do. I've been to every single one. I can go to my grave saying I was at the very first Trans Pride. Yeah, I was. But anyways, I remember I went down to Trans Pride and I was in the Marlborough pub because we were waiting to set off on the parade, and I desperately needed a pee. So I went into the gender-neutral toilets, and the one cubicle was taken up, and I was absolutely desperate. So I actually had to use the urinal because I was either that or I was going to piss myself. I do remember what, but basically I was peeing. The door of the cubicle opened up, and it was some gender fluid person who just got changed. Yeah, I do remember that. But there's no fucking problem. I don't see what the problem. I mean, every fucking household has a fucking gender neutral toilet. Actually, I want to know if TERFs, if they actually live with a family, do they actually have like 2 toilets? I mean, how can they do that? How do they know that not another family member is going to not sexually assault them in the gender neutral toilet there is in the house, because all houses have gender neutral toilets. So do they actually have 2 toilets? One male, one female. Yeah. Yeah. How far do they actually take this? Yeah. One wonders. Right, so I did promise you some good news. There is tinged with sadness. So Alan Turing is now on the new £50 note, and Bank of England has unveiled this today. Obviously, it's tinged with sadness because of what happened to Alan Turing. He committed suicide after he was, homosexuality was illegal back then, and he was prosecuted for that. But I'm glad that now we are honouring him. He was a brilliant mind, and modern computing has a lot to thank to him. And the work, and obviously so do us all, in the sense that he helped the war effort with breaking the Enigma code, and God knows how many lives that actually managed to save in the end, stuff like that. And I mean, it's good that we're now honouring him. Funny enough, I remember Jeremy Clark, of all people, Jeremy Clarkson has said in the past that we didn't honour Alan Turing enough in this country, and he's right. So I'm glad that that's now happening. It's as I said, it's good news, but tinged with some sadness. Talk about being petty. The Catholic Church opposed suicide hotline because it included support for LGBTQ people. This is similar to that story I covered the other day about that the GOP opposed the Violence Against Women Act in Congress because it included trans women, right? So that they were okay supporting it, if it only included cis women, but they're okay with violence being perpetrated against trans people. It appeared. Well, let's get into this.
U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops quietly lobbied behind the scenes against the creation of the National Suicide Hotline in 2019 because it included specific support for LGBTQ people. The group of church leaders also opposes the Violence Against Women Act for the same reason. All persons must be protected from violence, but codifying the classifications, sexual orientation, and gender identity, as contained in S47 is problematic, the bishops admitted in a statement.
Why is it problematic? Oh, I forgot. There's this crusty old book which says LGBTQ people are bad, though I'd love you to point to the actual passage where it says so. And you think that this is the word of your mystical sky daddy, who doesn't exist. Fuck's sake.
All persons must be protected from violence, but codifying the classifications, sexual orientation, and gender identity, as contained in S47 is problematic, the bishops admitted in a statement. The men also refused to consider providing broader public accommodations protections for women, people of color, and the disabled that would be included in the Equality Act because the bill would provide non-discrimination protections for LGBTQ people.
Oh, right. So, because you can't, be a bigot towards an LGBTQ people, you're prepared to throw everyone else under the fucking... But, fucking petty. It's... Sometimes I'm losing the will to live. This is one time.
The men also refused to consider providing broader public accommodations protections for women, people of color, and the disabled that would be included in the Equality Act because the bill would provide non-discrimination protections for LGBTQ people. The bishops previously criticized the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, RENDER, because it doesn't distinguish between sexual inclination and sexual conduct and does not represent an authentic step forward.
And Catholic priests know all about sexual conduct, don't they? Yeah. Oh, don't tell me they opposed this because it would they oppose any law which would stop Catholic priests fucking the altar boy.
The bishops previously criticized the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, RENDER, because it doesn't distinguish between sexual inclination and sexual conduct and does not represent an authentic step forward in the pursuit of justice in the workplace. The bishops even opposed the fairness.
Yeah, you get the drift, right? It's your typical Christian bigotry. Can't say I'm not surprised, but hey, Oh, we've already covered that. Oh yes, right. Do you remember? Anyone remember Rand Paul's diatribe against Rachel Levine, who this was her during her confirmation to be appointed Deputy Health Secretary in the United States? I've actually got a skeleton in my closet. I've actually stood in the room with Rand Paul. I've also been on a radio show with him. Because at that time, I was a libertarian. And I thought he was. But he doesn't sound libertarian here.
American culture is now normalizing the idea that minors can be given hormones to prevent their biological development of their secondary sexual characteristics. Dr. Levine, you have supported both allowing minors to be given hormone blockers to prevent them from going through puberty, as well as surgical destruction of a minor's genitalia. Like surgical mutilation, hormonal interruption of puberty can permanently alter and prevent secondary sexual characteristics. The American College of Pediatricians reports that 80 to 95% of prepubertal children with gender dysphoria will experience resolution by late adolescence if not exposed to medical intervention and social affirmation.
Oh, in other words, forcing them to live in a gender they don't want to live in. Yeah, you see, we've seen this countless times when children are forced to, including myself, to live in the gender they do not want to live in. And what happens when they get into adulthood? Yeah, they transition. I mean, I do offer the case of Rhea Cooper here. For those who don't know, Rhea Cooper was a trans teenager. And there was a documentary made about her. And in fact, it was the first time I ever saw because she met Paris Lees. He was quite empathetic towards her, obviously being a trans teenager herself. Having been a trans teenager herself, so shall I say. Anyways, Rhea, basically, there was some sort of issue with the family. They had transitioned, but then they detransitioned because, I don't know, there was, from what I know, there was some sort of issue with the family. And then what happened later on? Retransitioned. You see, here's the thing. I've known, a lot of trans people. Sorry, not a lot. Sorry, shit, slip of the tongue there. I've known trans people to detransition, and many of them then retransition, right? And they detransition for lots of reasons, because they're because being trans marginalised you from society. I mean, I was already marginalised from society anyways, due to being disabled. But as I said, they more often than not they retransition eventually. Yeah, gender dysphoria. The only way to deal with gender dysphoria is to transition. It is that is the only way to deal with it. This is something I've learned, the hard way, shall I say, because I fought against it and I fought against it and I fought against it, and it was killing me, right? And eventually I just had to relent. I'm trans. That's what I am. So, and the other thing I'd say about Rand Paul, other than he's a libertarian, he's supposedly meant to be a libertarian. I mean, his dad definitely. His dad was a racist as well, unfortunately. But Ron Paul was someone else I've stood in a room with. Ron Paul, or as I like, or Southerners used to say, Ron Paul. Ron Paul was definitely a libertarian. Rand Paul supposedly meant to be a libertarian, but if you're a libertarian, then you should support individual liberty. I mean, I certainly don't think he would be considered a libertarian by my friend Aria, who is a trans woman who's a libertarian. Oh, and I should say, I was going to include, there is for those who know about what's happening with Aria, there is a website set up where you can donate money for a legal fund. However, the link wasn't working when I was doing the running order for this show. So if it's back up tomorrow, I'll talk about that. Anyways.
Dr. Levine, do you believe that minors are capable of making such a life-changing decision as changing?
Yes. I knew I was trans when I was 4.
One sex.
Well, Senator, thank you for your interest in this question. Transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field with robust research and standards of care that have been developed. And if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed as the Assistant Secretary of Health, I would look forward to working with you and your office and coming to your office and discussing the particulars of this.
Educating Rand Paul. By the way, Rand Paul is actually meant to be a medical doctor. Now, I say supposedly. It's questionable whether he got a real medical doctorate. Can I just say that? There have been questions raised in the past about that.
standards of care for transgender medicine.
The specific question was about minors. Let's be a little more specific since you evaded the question. Do you support the government intervening to override the parent's consent to give a child puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and/or amputation surgery of breasts and genitalia? You have said that you're willing to accelerate the protocols for street kids. I'm alarmed that poor kids with no parents who are homeless and distraught, you would just go through this and allow that to happen to a minor. I would hope that you would have compassion for Kira Bell, who's a 23-year-old girl.
All right, so you couldn't find a case in the United States of a teenager detransition because it wasn't for them, right? Oh, so you have to refer to the case here. Weird that. And as it goes, Kira Bell is a poisonous turfy minx, and you know her experience is in the minority. Here's a figure for you: less than 2% of people who transition detransition. Okay.
Who was confused with her identity. At 14, she read on the internet about something about transsexual. She thought, well, maybe that's what I am. She ended up getting these puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones. She had her breasts amputated. But here's what ultimately she says now. And this is a very insightful decision from someone who made a mistake but was led to believe this was a good thing by the medical community. I made a brash decision as a teenager, as a lot of teenagers do, trying to find confidence and happiness. Except now the rest...
Yeah, Kira Bell might have made a rash decision, but, you know, yeah, it's not like most people fall out of bed, you know, and decide they want to live in the opposite, yeah, but they actually, they're the opposite gender, okay? That's not the case, right? Right? It wasn't, you know, I didn't fall out of bed, you know, I just... You know, I knew, and when I was 11, I remember the first time I ever told somebody and they laughed at me, and I was sent to fucking therapists who just told me I was fucking disturbed, you know, when I wasn't. I had gender fucking dysphoria. I needed fucking help. I wasn't allowed to fucking social transition, never mind our fucking hormones.
To my life will be negatively affected, she said, adding that the medicalized gender transitioning was a very temporary, superficial fix for a very complex identity issue. What I'm alarmed at is that you're not willing to say absolutely minors shouldn't be making decisions to amputate their breast or to amputate...
Minors don't fucking do that. Kira Bell was 16, can I add? That's not a minor, okay? For starters, you know, we're talking about minors. We're talking about people, kids, you know, younger than that, right? And as I keep saying, Kira Bell's experience is in the minority, extreme minority.
Their genitalia. For most of our history, we believe that minors don't have full rights and the parents need to be involved. So I'm alarmed that you won't say with certainty that minors should not have the ability to make the decision to take hormones that will affect them for the rest of their life. Will you make a more firm decision on whether or not minors should be involved in these decisions?
Senator, transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field, and if confirmed to the position of Assistant Secretary of Health, I would certainly be pleased to come to your office and talk with you and your staff about the standards of care and the complexity of this field.
Let it go into the record that the witness refused to answer the question.
No, she was telling you she would fucking educate you, you dumbass. And also, the fact that Rand Paul was basically implying that Rachel Levine, in her position, will try and brainwash, you know, all kids to thinking that they're fucking trans. Fuck you. Yeah, definitely not the case. But anyways, despite, you know, Rand Paul's objections, Dr. Rachel Levine makes history as the first trans woman officially confirmed by the Senate. Yay! So, yeah, she's been confirmed as the Deputy Health Secretary for Health. and it's really good news. She's not just because she's trans, but she actually, if you look at her record, she's really did some great work in Pennsylvania, whereas she was the health person, chief medical officer there, wasn't she? Yeah. So ending on a good story. I'm really happy for her. She does seem to be a genuinely nice and caring person who wants to make a difference. So I'm really pleased for her. Anyways, that brings to an end another edition of Botha Rants. If you like this video, please do give it a like. If you've got any feedback, please do leave a comment in the down below. If you think what I am doing is something worthwhile, then please do share this video with your friends and on social media. Please do tell people about me and this show. And most important of all, please subscribe, and also get your friends to subscribe. That is the most important thing you can do for me. Okay. All right. Well, look, you all take care of yourselves, and stay safe. Until the next time, peace out.